Hello and welcome back. I'm Natalie MacDonald and you're watching Dukascopy TV. Now, joining me for part 2 of a 3-part series, I've got Alexandre Vautravers in the studio with me once again. Alexandre, thank you so much for joining us again.
Hello again.
Now, today's interview is a little bit different. You have your RMS hat on. We're going to be talking about the NATO Summit 2014 taking place in Wales this year. Now, one of the key items on the agenda this year is burden sharing, and this comes as US and European defence spending really is on 2 totally different levels. How has it come to be so different, and why is it an issue now?
We're going to talk about numbers, and one of these numbers is 2%. NATO as a whole would like, this is certainly the declaration of intent, would like each member of the alliance to spend 2% of its GDP equivalent on defence. The reality is quite different. There's only 5 countries, including the United States of America, that are actually meeting this objective. So this is one first issue. Burden sharing, as you said it, it's going to be necessary for the smaller states who believed that it would be possible to spend less within this coalition or within this alliance. They're going to have to get up to speed and take on their share of the burden. The other part is the qualitative aspects, and that's the number of 20%. 20% is the target for modernization budgets in the military institutions. Many countries in Europe have now moved to a professional military force, and the fact of the matter is, in a professional military force, most of the money, most of the spending is actually going into salaries, into real estate, into property, into infrastructure, and not really into the purchase of modern military equipment. A country like Belgium, for example, spends about 73% of all its budget on salaries. So you understand that there's very little money available in order to modernize, to re-equip with modern tools.
Well, you touched there on kind of where the money is going, and is this divergence between US and European spending becoming more and more evident in the forces themselves?
It's very evident, and I'll just talk about the recent past, and that is the experience of the Libyan Operation Odyssey Dawn. Let's be quite clear, few, if any, European countries were able to contribute anything during this particular military operation, and those that eventually did participate did so, number one, with considerable strategic assets and support from the United States on one side, and number two, they were only able to last over several weeks and several months with very considerable efforts from the alliance and the United States in particular. So a lot of countries have certain assets, have certain capabilities, but they don't have all of the capabilities, and number two, they don't have these capabilities for a long duration.
How does this shape the debate then regarding a new international and more flexible force?
There's a very big, a very major issue that is going on at the moment, and I would relate this to the Ukrainian crisis. So essentially, countries that are more on the eastern side of Europe are feeling the threat, the risk, the pressure, the geopolitical context, let's put it this way, and they are advocating for more territorial defense, for more spending. The westernmost nations see things a little bit differently. An alliance is like a couple, essentially, and so these countries are seeing the real strategic objectives of NATO rather towards the south. This is the Middle East, this is African countries, and not so much Russia, and certainly no particular desire to go back to the tried and true Cold War situation.
This feeds in quite nicely to the last question I wanted to ask you, and that's how has the ongoing crisis in Ukraine reawakened almost the mistrust and reflexes of the Cold War? Can and will it continue to underpin security policy in your view?
I'm not sure it will underpin, but certainly it highlights the divisions that exist within the European Union with regards to a strategic partnership or alliance with Russia. Definitely, as I said, you have some countries, eastern countries within Europe, that are advocating to a to a return of the Cold War type of permanent American presence in Europe. Most of the Western nations clearly don't want this to happen, and so what is happening now is a solution, if you will, of consensus, of compromise, and the compromise is the United States will participate through the rotation of its forces, in particular in the Baltic states, in particular in Poland, where there is much much demand for this, but there is, for the time being, and depending on the situation in the Ukraine, there's no plans to go back to the Cold War situation, because this would be extremely expensive and would, I would say, probably not allow to reach the strategic objectives of the alliance with regards to the security of Europe, which is clearly more to the south today than it is to the east.
Alexandre, thank you very much for coming in and chatting with us about this. Thank you. That's all we've got time for right now. Alexandre will be back shortly for part 3 of this series. For now, though, it's goodbye.